Hi there, I'm Coach Kenneth.
And I'm Coach Victoria.
And in this video, we're going to be talking to you about, do they want to stay toxic?
Ooh. I wouldn't want to.
You know, I've noticed a lot of times in the comment section, people will start automatically jumping to narcissism. Mm-hmm. Okay? Everybody's talking about narcissism right now. But the reality is, narcissists are not that prevalent. Mm-hmm. Okay? There can be people that exhibit selfish and narcissistic traits, but it doesn't mean they're a full-blown narcissist. I mean, I think even 10% of the population would be too high. Mm-hmm. To saying there's not even 10% narcissists.
Right.
Right? And I'm pretty sure Margaret would say, no, it wasn't that high. Mm-hmm. Yes, people can exhibit narcissistic traits, but so many people that don't get exactly what they want when they feel entitled will just start throwing those accusations out there. Mm-hmm. He's narcissistic, okay? But if you pull out the DSM, he probably doesn't
meet all the criteria.
Yeah, or even many of the criteria.
Right.
But there are toxic, unhealthy things that people do. And of course, we want you to be in a healthy relationship. We're not encouraging people to go back into any kind of toxic situation where anybody's being abused or neglected. Mm-hmm. We want you guys to have healthy relationships. That's why we keep trying to teach you that. But if you look at the videos we put out, those videos don't get a lot of views.
Yeah.
And sadly.
I think there is a focus on toxic relationships being relationships with people who are narcissistic, have narcissistic traits, or bring a certain type of chaos into the relationship. But there are also other types of toxic relationships, like being with somebody who really isn't motivated and drags you down.
Yep.
Somebody who is limiting you from, growing as a person and, is staying in this small bubble. They could be depressed. They could have, other mental health issues going on as well.
Yeah.
So we don't want to limit just that view of toxicity in a relationship being one certain thing. There are other ways where a relationship can bring you down and can stifle, your possibilities as a human being, as a person trying to strive for better.
Mm-hmm. And that's why we're always talking about mental health. Mm-hmm. And being aware of your mental health and working through issues, because, if you get caught up in your depression and it overwhelms you for long periods of time, it's going to likely have a big impact on the relationship where mm-hmm. the person doesn't feel cared about, the partner, they feel helpless too. Things aren't changing. They feel taken for granted, taken advantage of, all these things. And it mm-hmm. just becomes a situation where everybody's unhappy.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So the focus of this video is going to be on going to therapy. This is either you going to therapy or your partner going to therapy, and specifically when your partner refuses to go to therapy or get some type of professional help for either your relationship or for them themselves.
So what do? It's not an easy situation. Mm-hmm. If you love somebody and you want it to work, but they just continue to refuse to make any changes or any efforts, it's not easy. No. Because mm-hmm. it's like maybe you have kids together, maybe you've been together for 20 years, and maybe they lost a parent or they lost a job, or I had somebody today that this guy had long symptoms of COVID, and he almost wound up dying. He had to go to the hospital 3 times, wow. and his lungs collapsed like 3 different times, and now it's like, I don't know, a year later, and he still isn't working, and so all those things are going to have a big impact on somebody's mental health. But you got to make a real effort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is what's tough, is that you only have control of yourself and not your partner. You can't force anybody into a therapist's office and say, sit here, talk, let's work on it. That's just not how it works. And so it can feel really helpless to be in a relationship where your partner doesn't have that same drive to do better. It can really feel stifling. And a lot of times people end up going to couples therapy or therapy in general as a last-ditch effort, as a last resort. Like, things have gotten so bad to the point where now this is the last possible thing that we can do to fix this, which is really not the most optimal way of using therapy. Ideally, you'd like to go to therapy to make good relationships great. to be working on those strengths that are already there. And it can be really hard once a relationship is on the verge of shambles to then say, all right, therapist.
You fix this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So therapy can be helpful for so many reasons, for couples, for individuals, and even if it's just you going to therapy, that can shift the whole dynamic of the relationship. You know, sometimes we feel like, man, it really is my partner who has all these mental health issues. You know, they are really the ones to go to therapy. There's always something that we can benefit. There's always an advantage that we can have by working on ourselves, by processing our own traumas, our own attachment wounds, and how we show up in relationships.
Sadly, you might get a therapist who hasn't been in therapy.
This is true. This is true.
It is true. You know, when you're in grad school, they really encourage you to go to therapy. I did. I had 2 different therapists in grad school. And then, obviously, after the breakup with Margaret, the breakup that I had with the Applebee's girl, I went to Margaret.
The breakup
with Margaret. The breakup with Margaret was Margaret comforting me for 12 years after that breakup. I had the breakup with the Applebee's girl, and that's when I went to Margaret for therapy because I hadn't seen her in a couple years, and she really helped me work through a lot of stuff. So, you know, I've done a lot of work. You know, It doesn't look like it, but
it does take a lot of work and a lot of processing, a lot of talking, a lot of thinking, and also a lot of feeling. You know, that's one that we don't talk about as much.
It's not easy to feel.
It is not easy to feel.
Yeah.
So a lot of this video is going to be based off of Dr. Tasha Sider from her Psychology Today article on this very topic. So if you would like to learn more, you can research a bit about the work that she's done. So we want to start out by saying this type of dynamic is actually pretty normal. To have somebody feeling hesitant about going to therapy or unsure or nervous about it.
Well, there's been such a bad stigma about therapy over the years. And I mean, honestly, the field has come a long way in the last 40 years. I mean, if you think about what it was even 50 years ago, you might have been getting, well, more than 50 years ago now, but they were doing shock therapy and you know what I mean? All kinds of early interventions that they didn't know what to do. They were just trying everything to try and help, you know? So, you know, there's been a stigma about it for many, many years. And, you know, people feel like if they went to therapy, you were crazy. You know, even when I was a kid, you were crazy if you went to therapy. Now it's much different. Now it's getting a lot more ingrained in the culture, at least here in the United States.
Right.
People are getting really proactive about therapy and dealing with their issues.
Yeah, there's a lot more information out there about it now and how effective it is for a wide range of issues, not just severe mental illness.
Sure.
So I think that's great. Some people have this fear that going to therapy will bring those issues out and make things worse. And of course, if you are going to therapy with the intention of, man, I know I have a lot of trauma that I have to unpack, that in itself is terrifying.
Yeah.
For anybody who has been through trauma and who has, for example, post-traumatic stress disorder, one of the criteria for that disorder is when you're literally avoiding anything that reminds you of the original trauma. So imagine how challenging it would be to intentionally put yourself in a seat where then you're expected to talk about it, think about it, bring it up to another person when you've been trying to avoid it maybe for years sometimes.
Yeah.
And so it is normal to have this hesitancy of, oh, like we're going to talk about those things that I'm most afraid to talk about or that I'm uncomfortable talking about.
And one of the other things is like, if you have a partner that's constantly saying you need therapy, it's like you're admitting defeat. Like I'm the one that's causing all the problems in this relationship. Right?
Yeah.
You know, by kind of like saying, okay, I'll go. It's like admitting, all right, yep, we're in this mess because of me and not because of you too. And nobody likes to feel like that.
Yeah, there's a sense of shame that comes with that. Of, you know, it's all my fault. You know, I have to carry this pressure and burden of fixing everything. It can be a lot.
I had 2 exes that really needed therapy. And when I was much younger, I bring them up every once in a while, but one particular ex, actually, remember I said I had seen therapy in grad school. The first appointment that I had, I was late by about 5 minutes. I couldn't find a parking spot on the campus. It was horrible. And my girlfriend, her leg was shaking. She was so angry when I walked in the office. She started screaming at me in front of our brand new therapist who we hadn't met yet, my current therapist, the couples therapist that we were going to. It was like, and so eventually I couldn't stay in the relationship with her because her anger, she would just get so angry about stuff. And, we're actually friendly now and friends now because it's been a long time. But, she was just, I think, still immature and kind of got her own way at home and was kind of spoiled. But then I had another girlfriend. Actually, she was the one that friend requested me recently.
Oh.
After years.
Wow.
I mean, we broke up before the Applebee's girl. And so she added me on social media recently.
It's wild.
Out of nowhere. And she had a lot of extreme trauma. So you know a little bit about it. But some of the worst trauma I have ever heard. And so I know that feeling of being with a partner that refuses to go to therapy. And it just got to the point where I just couldn't take it anymore because she couldn't regulate her emotions. She was angry all the time. She was lashing out. And it continued for years, and it just got worse and worse and worse. So I know what it's like to be with somebody who refuses to go to therapy. And sometimes you just have to say, okay, I can't keep doing this. This is really bringing me down.
Yeah, and sometimes you need therapy for yourself with help with that decision because that is a huge decision to make. Yeah, many people are afraid of unpacking those traumas. Just imagine being put in this place where you have eyes on you and you're expected to talk. I promise you that most therapists, good therapists, understand that and go at a certain pace and make sure that the whole process is best for you, meaning that it won't re-traumatize you. That's not the goal of any therapist out there, is re-traumatization, I promise you that. So a lot of it is also understanding what therapy is and what it isn't. That can be really helpful. Some people have had a bad experience with a therapist.
Oh,
and
that
will
is
never
so
go
true.
again.
Oh,
They had
it's
just
so
one
true.
bad experience and it ruined it.
I've seen it. I've literally seen
I know
it.
you have.
One, not to me, but somebody that I dated. They went one time, and the therapist was into tapping and doing something with tapping, and that was it. That they never went back again.
And it's hard, sometimes it's not a match between a therapist and a client, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes it could be personality, could be technique, it could be theory that the therapists use.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Everybody's different.
Yeah.
You think about it, like if you have 7 teachers in a semester, you may really like 2 of them, and you may dislike 3 of them. And it could just be their style, their personality, whatever,
Yeah.
Same thing with a clinician or a doctor or a lawyer, whoever, any professional.
Right.
So you just got to find somebody who's a good fit.
Exactly. Yeah, which can be hard, but it is worth it in the end when you do find somebody that you connect with and can see growth with. Another thing I want to mention, just because it's practical and probably affects quite a few people, is also the money and time aspect. Of course, nowadays with telehealth, there are many more options than there were in the past, and there's a lot more affordable therapy options now too. So if you do a little bit of research, I'm sure you'll find something out there for you. But I do understand that this can be a barrier for some.
I actually think that was one of the positive things that came from COVID is all the shift to telehealth, because insurance did not used to cover a lot of that before, but they switched over and now it's a lot more available to people, so it makes your life easier. And because of the technology, you don't necessarily have to go to somebody's office.
Yeah, I think it does make it a lot more accessible for people who have a hard time with transportation, etc. So how do we bring this up to a partner? This can really be the tricky part because we want to communicate that we want them to go to therapy, we want the relationship to go to therapy, without sounding like you're judging them or criticizing them or making them out to be the bad guy in the relationship.
It's not easy to do.
It's not easy. It's not. You want to make sure you're not coming in with an agenda of, oh, we need to fix you. There's something broken here, and so you need to go figure it out and then come back when you're all nice and tidy with a bow on top. So you don't want to have that type of approach. Or you don't want to approach them with, I'm right about this specific conflict or argument or situation, and we need to go to therapy so that the therapist can tell you that I'm right.
Yeah, because it's only going to turn them off real quick.
Yeah. Instead, okay, you want to approach them with a curiosity. Why is it that they're hesitant about therapy? Are they afraid that the therapist is going to take sides? Mm-hmm. Are they afraid of not finding a therapy that they mesh with? Or the reasons that we talked about just recently as to why people are hesitant towards it. So approach them with curiosity, have that conversation first. Next, you also want to look at the issue as a we problem, as a we project. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. Mm-hmm. Project, something that we're both working on, rather than this is a you problem. You can offer to go with them. You can offer to help them find somebody. I've seen these work 50% of the time. So it can help if you kind of start with that little spark of, hey, I'll do this with you. And also go yourself. There's that option of exposing yourself to therapy, maybe going to a couple sessions and having your partner see, okay, this is something where he's still alive after talking about some traumas. He's still here, so this isn't something that will completely deplete you. And showing them by example that this is something that can be helpful.
Yeah, because it looks good if you're like sitting there saying, we need to work on this issue, and I'm willing to do my half. I'm going. Mm-hmm. I'm doing this. Right. I'm invested. Then it looks a lot better than, we need to fix this. Here's your therapist.
Exactly.
What I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not easy to navigate this. Wanting help, having a partner that wants to make changes, is committed to changes, is not easy. Change is scary, so it can be helpful to start small. Mm-hmm. Little things. Conversations, just seeing if they're open to little things. Even, I heard this is a good book. Mm-hmm. Maybe, I heard this is a good book for couples. Would you be interested in reading it if I got it and you got it, and then we could talk about it? Mm-hmm. Esther Perel's got like a card game.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So idea. Like things like that. Mm-hmm. And just try to be encouraging about the situation and supporting it in whatever way you can. Mm-hmm. It's not easy.
It's not at all.
People get really sensitive about these issues.
Mm-hmm. Like I mentioned before, learning about therapy itself can be really helpful too. So maybe this is even just setting up a little consultation with the therapist to see, okay, what is it that you think you can help us with? Mm-hmm. What are your views? Remember that this is a person that you're hiring. So if things aren't working out, if it's not vibing, you have that option to say, okay, we're going to go look for a therapist who might be more aligned with us. That's perfectly fine. Yeah. And remember that therapy is a net positive. Sometimes things get a little bit worse, feel like they are before they do get better. But overall, the experience, is something that is going to be helpful for you and for them. Like I mentioned before, set the example. Go yourself. If one part of a system changes, normally it affects the rest of the system. So what can happen is either your partner sees that, is inspired by it, is motivated by it, and says, yeah, I'll try therapy too. I'll do a couple sessions, why not? Or your partner distances more, and that does give you a little bit more insight into the direction of the relationship.
Yeah, and the likelihood of, how healthy it's going to get or unhealthy it's going to get. Mm-hmm. Are they willing to grow and change and invest in you and the connection, or do they want to stay stuck in ways that may be failing them or not working or unhealthy or even toxic? Mm-hmm. So a lot to think about, right?
A lot.
Hopefully this has been a little bit helpful in guiding you with that, because these are complicated issues for all couples or many couples, mm-hmm. because unfortunately most people grew up with issues in their family. Mm-hmm. Very few people grew up in that, Leave It to Beaver household where it was all great and wonderful and loving, mm-hmm.
Right. And sometimes you're right. There does come a point where, you start noticing that your partner is toxic for you, that the relationship is not going well, and that, you might not be willing to wait for them to go through therapy and work through those issues. Yep. You have to make those calls for yourself.
Yep.
So hopefully that this video gave you some more insight and helped you with that decision if that's the situation you're in.
All right. So if you want to get our help personally, you could do that on my website, askcraig.net. I do email coaching and I do Skype. Victoria is also available for Skype coaching.
I'm here whenever you're ready.
Just click on her name at the top of the website to schedule with her. But that's it for this video. I'm Coach Craig Kenneth.
And I'm Coach Victoria.
And we will talk with you soon.